Hi again. In the last segment, we saw that Russell stressed that 1914 was not the beginning of the end, but it was the end of the Battle of Armageddon. Do we know that from modern Watchtower publications, or has it been fudged completely by the way in which they frame their own history, especially that first 2 or 3 decades? This time, the concentration is on the period of 1910 to 1912. In 1904, Russell stressed the importance of 1910 to 1912. And here's the quotes. This one is from The New Creation, published in 1904, page 579. According to our expectations, the stress of the great time of trouble will be on us soon, somewhere between 1910 and 1912, culminating with the end of the times of the Gentiles, October 1914. The beginning of the severity of the trouble is not distinctly marked in the scriptures and is rather conjectural. We infer that so great a trouble, so worldwide a catastrophe, could scarcely be accomplished in less than 3 years, and that if it lasted much more than 3 years, no flesh would be saved. So that's a speculation about the 3-year period from 1910 leading to 1914. Gruss says a number of statements Russell made in 1914, 1915, and 1916 in reference to Armageddon and the establishment of Messiah's kingdom are significant. Now here's one from May 1, 1914, a bare 4 or 5 months before the date. There is absolutely no ground for Bible students to question that the consummation of this gospel age is now even at the door, and that it will end, as the scriptures foretell, in a great time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation. We see the participants in this great crisis banding themselves together. The great crisis, the great clash, symbolically represented as a fire that will consume the ecclesiastical heavens and the social earth, is very near. That is from Watchtower, May 1, 1914. And this is the September 1, 1914, a mere month before the date. While it is possible that Armageddon may begin next spring, that would be the spring of 1915, yet it is rather purely speculation to attempt to say just when. But they had said for now 20 years or more that Armageddon would end in 1914. We see, however, that there are parallels between the close of the Jewish age and this gospel age. These parallels seem to point to the year just before us, particularly the early months. That would be the early months of 1915. Then December 14th, 1914, Watchtower reprint. Few of the awakening ones realized that the present war, which had already been raging for about 4 or 5 months at this point, is permitted for the weakening of the nations, preparatory to the utter collapse of the present order of things and the ushering in of the new order, the reign of righteousness under Messiah's kingdom. So there's the beginning of a thought that they carried even until the time I was baptized in 1970. Somehow the 1914 war was the prelude to Armageddon. And that would, in these days, when Russell's writing this, of course, that prelude is immediately before Armageddon. Armageddon is not postponed for several decades after. But anyway, here's him developing that same thought, April 1, 1915. The Watchtower said this: the Battle of Armageddon, to which this war, World War I, as they called it, Great War in those days, to which this war is leading, will be a great contest between right and wrong, and will signify the complete and everlasting overthrow of the wrong, and the permanent establishment of Messiah's righteous kingdom for the blessing of the world. Our sympathies are broad enough to cover all engaged in the dreadful strife, as our hope is broad enough and deep enough to include all in the great blessings which our Master and his millennial kingdom are about to bring to the world. Now, it needs to be said, because of our present view of Armageddon, if we're witnesses, that in those days they didn't think that everybody would die at Armageddon. In effect, they believed that Armageddon would save the great majority of the human race from being destroyed. And that belief continued right into the Rutherford era, right up to really about 1925. And then this is from September 1, 1916, so 2 months before Russell's death. We see no reason for doubting, therefore, that the times of the Gentiles ended in October 1914, and that a few more years will witness their utter collapse and the full establishment of God's kingdom in the hands of Messiah. So they're already waffling on the few more years idea, and of course they'll get more precise again when Russell dies 2 months later and the finished mystery is published. Then from Russell's sermons, there's no actual date on this particular sermon, but this is Russell himself. The present Great War in Europe is the beginning of the Armageddon of the Scriptures. It will eventuate in the complete overthrow of all the systems of error which have so long oppressed the people of God and deluded the world. We believe the present war cannot last much longer until revolution shall break out. Next time we're going to deal with the finished mystery and its predictions. It's more precise predictions than this. I'll put in a link to the cover-up, the 1914 cover-up. So last time we linked to 7 predictions Russell had been bold to make about what would happen by 1914. What did they do in subsequent editions of Russell's books? And now this can't all be blamed on Rutherford and his cohorts, because Russell himself was still alive after the first editions published after the 1914 date went by were actually supervised by Russell himself. So we've done a video or 2 on that subject, which I will be glad to link on your screen. See you soon.